Booktube, buckle up. Today on the deep dive, we are plunging headfirst into, well, the tangled, thorny mess that is the relationship between Heathcliff and Catherine in Wuthering Heights. Forget fairy tale romance. This is a story of a connection so intense it curdles into something deeply disturbing. We're talking next level toxicity, folks.
It's fascinating how Bronte sets this up right away. You have Catherine's famous declaration, "I am Heathcliff, he's always, always in my mind."
Right.
And that's not just about, loving someone. It suggests this almost blurring of boundaries, a loss of the individual self, maybe?
Totally. It sounds like the ultimate soulmate connection on the surface, that twin flame idea.
Yeah.
But almost immediately, you see how this supposed deep bond becomes, well, almost a justification for inflicting pain.
Exactly.
Can we really call this intense soul bonding anything other than a breeding ground for, truly awful behavior towards each other?
That's such a crucial point. Their interactions, they feel less about actual love and more about a constant power struggle, a need to dominate each other emotionally, maybe.
Yeah, like a push and pull.
And Catherine's choice to marry Edgar Linton for social standing isn't just a plot point. It's a deliberate act. It wounds Heathcliff so deeply.
Oh, absolutely.
And his reaction is to lash out, not just at Edgar, but at everyone around him, including Catherine, indirectly. It's vengeance.
And it's not like Catherine is some innocent victim here either. She admits she loves Heathcliff more deeply, yet she chooses this path she knows will absolutely devastate him.
There's a real cruelty in that, isn't there?
Definitely. A kind of manipulation of their intense bond, maybe for her own perceived security. It just highlights how their individual desires and pride become weapons against each other.
And if we think about the context, the societal backdrop, the rigid class structure undeniably puts pressure on Catherine, that's real.
Sure.
But her choice, it also seems to reflect this internal conflict. She's weighing this wild, passionate love against social stability, security with Edgar.
And she picks security.
She does, and she seems fully aware of the emotional fallout for Heathcliff.
And Heathcliff just takes that rejection, internalizes it completely, feeling like his lower social standing makes him unworthy.
Right, and that bitterness just festers. It absolutely fuels his later vengeful acts. He takes the pain he experiences and, he inflicts it tenfold on others.
Creating this awful cycle of abuse that just permeates the entire story down through generations even.
Yeah, it really does. And what's particularly unsettling, I think, is how this obsession just persists, even after Catherine's death.
Oh, the haunting part, yeah.
Heathcliff's famous cry, "Be with me always, take any form, drive me mad, only do not leave me in this abyss."
Chilling.
It showcases a man utterly consumed by a ghost, just unable to move on. It doesn't really feel like romantic longing at that point, does it?
No, not at all. It feels like this desperate, possessive clinging. It speaks volumes about how profoundly unhealthy their attachment always was.
Exactly. It's like their connection is so warped that even death doesn't bring release. It just continues the torment in a way.
So this isn't a love story to envy, clearly. It's more like a stark warning, isn't it? About how intense passion can just devolve into something truly destructive. Burns too hot.
That's a great way to put it. Bronte presents us with this incredibly powerful example of how an all-consuming connection, when it's fueled by pride, social pressures, unchecked obsession, it can lead straight to mutual abuse and just lasting devastation.
Ashes, like you said.
Yeah, it's a relationship that burns so fiercely it leaves nothing but ashes behind.
So for all you booktubers diving into these intense literary relationships, Wuthering Heights offers a really crucial lesson, I think. Sometimes what feels like an undeniable soul connection, that I am Heathcliff feeling, can actually be a deeply, deeply toxic bond. What are the red flags we should maybe be looking for, both in fiction and perhaps even in how we think about relationships?
That really is the key question, isn't it? How does grappling with the, frankly, destructive nature of Heathcliff and Catherine's relationship inform how we interpret other stories?
Yeah.
Ever read a love story that's so intense, you start thinking, okay, do these characters need, serious help?
Definitely. Hey, we're diving right into that territory.
Yeah, headfirst into two really iconic pairs. Heathcliff and Catherine from Wuthering Heights, and of course, Bella and Edward from Twilight.
Two very different flavors of intense.
Totally. We've been looking at some comparisons, and today's deep dive is all about unpacking, just how wild their bonds are.
And specifically, right, we're trying to figure out just how, let's say, off the rails Heathcliff's obsession really is, especially next to Edward.
Exactly. Edward seems so composed, maybe too composed. And then there's Catherine's emotional roller coaster versus Bella's journey. Does Bella actually mature?
It's fascinating just looking at how they describe their connection. You have Catherine's famous line, "I am Heathcliff."
Iconic.
It really is. And the sources we read highlight that it's more than just love, right?
Okay.
It's like this total merging, almost primal. It sounds romantic.
But it goes south fast.
Yeah, it becomes incredibly unhealthy. Like, they can't live with each other, but they also can't live without each other. It's inherently destructive.
And then contrast that with Edward. He says, "You are my life now."
Also very intense, very sweeping. But the way it's presented, it feels more tilted towards, I guess, idealized devotion.
Yeah.
Protection.
Protection is a big theme there, definitely. That "I am Heathcliff" line, though, it really sets the tone for Wuthering Heights. Pure intensity.
That profound connection just breeds destruction. Catherine chooses status over Heathcliff.
Big mistake. Huge.
And boom, that kicks off his whole revenge plot. It just devastates everyone. It's like love is literally a battlefield. Bluntly said, basically, everyone loses.
Yeah, no winners there. Now, Edward, he tries to leave Bella, remember? For her own good.
Right. Framed as a sacrifice, which, is a world away from Heathcliff's actions, which just seem purely spiteful. Like, I'm going to make everyone miserable.
It's a massive difference in how they react to, well, perceived threats or obstacles to the relationship.
Exactly. And that difference really comes through when you look at how their love actually manifests their actions.
Okay, yeah. Talk about that.
Well, with Heathcliff and Catherine, that passion just sours, doesn't it?
Yeah.
It turns toxic, fueled by pain, resentment.
The cycle just keeps going.
It does. Heathcliff's awful marriage, how cruel he is to Isabella, to Hareton, to young Cathy, and his obsession with Catherine's ghost. It's all-consuming.
The sources nailed it, didn't they? Something like their love is wrapped in power, control, and bitterness.
That's the one. It sums it up perfectly. Their deepest feelings become weapons.
Okay, so then Bella and Edward. We have to mention the sleeping thing. Edward watching Bella sleep.
Yeah, you can't really ignore that. Definitely raise an eyebrow. Creepy.
Which, fair. But in the story's context, it's always shown as him being, like, hyper-protective.
Right. And he is very controlling about her safety, her mortality, eventually her transformation. But, and this is key, the sources point out Bella's growth.
Yes. Unlike Catherine.
Exactly. Bella starts making her own choices, asserting herself more as the books go on. Catherine seems trapped, just consumed by her feelings. Bella finds agency.
So what's driving them, psychologically speaking?
Well, for Heathcliff and Catherine, the sources point to, like, a perfect storm.
Yeah.
Abandonment issues, the rigid class system, this kind of inherent wildness.
You really feel that class thing is huge for Catherine, right? Her inner conflict. Heathcliff or Edgar? Passion or society?
Absolutely central. And Heathcliff, he takes that rejection, that classism, internalizes it, and then just unleashes it as fury.
It's this awful feedback loop of pain they're both stuck in. Victim, perpetrator, back and forth.
Yeah. Now, Bella and Edward, their drivers feel different. Bella has this low self-esteem, this fear of being ordinary.
She wants something more.
Right. And Edward feels like a monster, unworthy of love. So their bond gives them both validation, sense of purpose, maybe destiny. It's not that raw, chaotic passion of Heathcliff and Catherine. It feels need-based almost.
Interesting distinction. Need versus, I don't know, elemental force.
Something like that. And look where it leads them. The outcomes.
Drastically different.
Totally. Catherine dies young. Heathcliff descends into this madness, just mourning and raging until he dies too. Their love, as one source puts it, consumes them and curses the next generation.
A true Gothic cautionary tale. Ruin. Utter ruin.
Then you flip to Twilight. Bella gets her transformation, her literal rebirth into this eternal life with Edward.
And they get a family, 𝔚𝔢𝔦𝔫𝔤, as this symbol of hope, unity.
Exactly. The sources called it romanticized, sure, but also emotionally redemptive. It's the polar opposite of the tragedy in Wuthering Heights.
Okay, let's circle back to that wicked love source. It talked about twin flames or toxic soulmates, right?
Yeah, specifically for Heathcliff and Catherine, and it uses Catherine's line again, "I am Heathcliff, he's always, always in my mind," to show just how obsessive that bond was.
Obsessive is the word.
That this connection, instead of nurturing them, just became destructive.
Yeah, they basically choked the life out of each other, emotionally speaking. It wasn't support, it was entanglement, possession.
And the power struggles were constant. Catherine picking Edgar for status. That's seen as the ultimate betrayal, the thing that lights the fuse for Heathcliff's revenge on everyone.
It really emphasizes Catherine's choice there, driven by society, by her own conflict, how that acted as the catalyst.
Definitely. And Heathcliff's reaction to that rejection. It's just not mature. He internalized it, weaponizes it. That's a big part of why his behavior seems so, well, nuts, especially when you compare it to Edward.
Even if Edward's reactions are extreme in their own vampire way, they seem more controlled, less purely destructive.
Perhaps.
Yeah.
Heathcliff seems driven purely by his wounded pride and pain.
Yeah.
And even death doesn't end it for him.
Oh God, yeah. His pleas to Catherine's ghost. Chilling. It just screams instability. He can't let go. He wants to be haunted, consumed. So Wuthering Heights is this incredibly tragic, cautionary tale. Love burning so hot it just incinerates everything, leaves nothing but damage.
Absolutely. And then Twilight gives us this immortal fantasy. Love is still intense, sure, full of drama, but ultimately it leads to togetherness, family, forever.
So wrapping it up, we have Heathcliff's totally destructive obsession and Catherine's, frankly, immature and fatal choices over here.
Consumed by passion.
And then Edward's protective, okay, maybe overprotective devotion, and Bella's journey towards finding her strength, her transformation.
Growing into her power, literally.
It really makes you think, doesn't it, about what we mean by soulmate. Where's the line between that deep connection and just toxic obsession?
It's a blurry line sometimes, especially in literature. Maybe that's the final thought for you listening. Thinking about these two couples, their emotional journeys, their endings, which pair do you find more compelling?
Yeah, and what do their stories, all that drama and intensity, tell us about love, about obsession, and maybe about how we view emotional maturity in the books we read?
And, okay, so our mission today, we're going to be looking at the almost, well, uncanny similarities in how Jacob Black and Heathcliff approach love. Let's just say it's intense and sometimes maybe not exactly healthy.
Intense is a good word for it, maybe an understatement.
Right. And we'll also dig into how Edward Cullen and Edgar Linton both kind of represent that safer option.
Yeah.
You know, the one offering security but maybe lacking a certain spark.
Able choice. Yeah.
Exactly. Plus, we need to talk about the lasting impact Jacob and Heathcliff have on the next generation in these stories.
That's a crucial point.
And finally, we'll contrast how Edward's idea of love actually evolves, whereas Edgar's, well, it pretty much stays the same, doesn't it?
It really does. And to help us sort of navigate all these literary connections, we'll be looking at these characters and their very intricate relationships.
Okay, awesome. So let's dive right in. Jacob and Heathcliff. These guys, I mean, they stir up some really strong feelings in readers, don't they? It's often this mix of fascination and maybe a little bit of yikes.
Definitely yikes sometimes, yeah.
So what's really at the core of their, let's call it their passionate intensity?
Well, what's truly striking, I think, is that both of them seem to operate from a really similar place deep down, this outsider complex.
Okay, explain that a bit.
Okay, so think about Heathcliff. He's brought into the Earnshaw family, an adopted orphan, right? And he's constantly made to feel different, like he's less than everyone else, except maybe Catherine initially.
Right, she's the only one.
Yeah, and this just breeds this deep well of rage inside him. Resentment, too, his whole drive for power later on, his obsession with revenge. It feels like his twisted way of coping with always feeling pushed aside, marginalized.
That makes so much sense. He's always fighting for some kind of validation, isn't he? For his sense of belonging that he never really got. And you see that same kind of dynamic with Jacob, right?
You absolutely do.
He's always second fiddle to Edward. Always the friend, the safe guy who ultimately doesn't get picked.
The consolation prize, almost.
Yeah. And he even says it, that feeling of not being good enough, especially because he's losing to someone he sees as fundamentally other, not even human. You feel like that just digs that inferiority complex even deeper.
Exactly. And this core feeling of, just not being enough, it fuels so much of their behavior, their jealousy, their pain. It doesn't just stay inside.
No way.
It bursts out as possessiveness, those huge emotional outbursts we see from both of them. It really shines a light on how both Heathcliff and Jacob are driven by this profound need to feel worthy of love, to have it totally on their terms.
But when they don't get it.
Exactly. When that love isn't given back in the way they demand, it just, it takes a really dark, almost toxic turn.
Which, okay, that leads us perfectly into this whole idea of love as possession.
Yeah.
This is where it gets really complicated and, frankly, a bit disturbing.
He doesn't just love Catherine, he sees her as intrinsically part of him, an extension of his own being.
So when she chooses Edgar,
it's not just rejection of his love, it's a rejection of him, his very self, and his reaction. It's this wave of destruction aimed at everyone connected to her.
And it doesn't stop there, does it? He messes with the next generation, too.
Oh, absolutely. He tries to control their lives, their romances, almost like he's trying to I don't know, force a rewrite of his own failed story through them. It's incredibly manipulative.
That urge to control the narrative, yeah, that's key to understanding him. For Heathcliff, love isn't about like mutual growth or anything healthy.
Not at all.
It's about ownership. It's about bending reality to fit what he wants, even if it means hurting people.
Yeah.
And we see a similar kind of thing, maybe less calculatedly cruel up front, but still possessive in Jacob.
Definitely. His constant pushing, telling Bella she should love him because he's the right one for her.
Yes, yeah.
It completely ignores her feelings, her actual choice, her agency, and the emotional manipulation, like wishing her dead rather than letting her be with Edward. That comes from the same place that need to control her affections.
Those moments with Jacob were definitely uncomfortable to read.
Yeah.
For sure. And then there's the whole imprinting on 𝔤𝔢𝔦𝔤𝔥𝔢𝔰 thing. I mean, booktube, let's be real.
Right.
That's a pretty permanent, and you could definitely argue possessive way to stay tied to someone's family.
Right.
It feels like this deep, almost primal need to possess some part of Bella.
Yeah.
Even if it has to be through her daughter.
Precisely. For both of them, love turns into this battleground.
Yeah.
A fight for control, for legacy, for validating their own bruised egos. It stops being about connection and becomes about this desperate need to hold on, to possess.
But okay, what's interesting is that under all that aggression, that control, there seems to be some real vulnerability there too, right? Buried deep down.
Absolutely. It's like they've built these huge walls. With Heathcliff, you can almost glimpse the wounded kid underneath, you know, the one who was abandoned, emotionally starved. His cruelty, as awful as it is, feels like this terribly twisted response to never really getting over Catherine choosing Edgar. The pain is real, no doubt, but he weaponizes it.
He turns it outwards. And with Jacob, you see, well, a teenager basically, grappling with these huge, intense feelings. He just doesn't have the maturity to handle yet.
Right, he's emotionally overwhelmed.
His anger, his impulsive actions, that deep fear of loss, it all just kind of boils over. And some analyses point out his werewolf transformation can almost be seen as a metaphor for that inner turmoil, that emotional volatility.
That's a great point. The physical mirrors the emotional.
So ultimately, you've got two characters who are pretty emotionally immature, struggling to deal with massive feelings of love and rejection. And they fall back on anger and possessiveness as defense mechanisms because, well, they don't really have healthier coping strategy.
It's a shared tragic flaw, isn't it? It really is.
Yeah, and it makes sense when you think about the literary archetypes they represent.
It does. Their similarities become even clearer then. Heathcliff perfectly embodies that Byronic anti-hero figure. He's driven by this powerful mix of revenge and this like undying lost love. His story is all about tragic, destructive relationships and pretty severely stunted emotional growth.
And Jacob? He fits that mold of the rejected lover, maybe with a bit of that nice guy syndrome thrown in.
Could argue that, yeah.
Motivated by this deep fear of ending up alone and a protectiveness that kind of twists into control, even the way his story wraps up with the imprinting. It feels a bit questionable, doesn't it? Like, has he really grown emotionally?
It's definitely ambiguous closure. It leaves you wondering.
Okay, so let's pivot now. Let's talk about the safer choices.
Yeah.
Edward Cullen and Edgar Linton. On the surface, these guys are like the complete opposite of Heathcliff and Jacob's stormy passion.
A stark contrast, yeah. They present as much more composed.
Definitely. They're all refinement and gentleness. Maybe even, dare we say, the less dramatic option.
You could say that.
You've got Edward with his, old world manners, that supernatural beauty, his fierce protectiveness, which, okay, booktube, let's be honest, sometimes felt a little bit controlling for her own good.
Definitely bordered on that sometimes.
And then Edgar. He's the classic well-mannered gentleman. Wealthy, stable, offers comfort, social standing.
Yeah.
The calm choice. Even Catherine admits she doesn't love him with that same fire she has for Heathcliff. But she marries him for that security.
Precisely.
Yeah.
Both Edward and Edgar represent a certain kind of stability, that composed, predictable exterior. They look like the sensible choice, right? On paper.
Totally.
But as literary analysis often highlights, neither of them fully gets the wilder, more passionate hearts of the women they love. Not really.
Right. They both offer protection, but it comes from different places, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Edward's protection is tied up with his vampire nature, his guilt, his struggle with what he is.
His save her from myself complex.
Exactly. He genuinely thinks he's keeping Bella safe, even if his methods are sometimes intense. But what's interesting with him is that over the series, he does seem to learn to respect her choices, especially about her becoming a vampire.
He does show growth there, whereas Edgar's protection feels more like putting Catherine on a pedestal, treating her like this delicate thing he can't quite figure out.
Yeah, like a porcelain doll or something.
His love is definitely safe, comfortable, but ultimately it feels a bit suffocating because he just doesn't have the depth to connect with her on that raw emotional level, especially about Heathcliff. He remains pretty emotionally inflexible throughout the whole book.
And that difference in their emotional depth, that's really key, isn't it?
Huge difference.
Edward, despite all his initial brooding and self-loathing, actually goes through some major emotional development in Twilight. He wrestles with his morality, he learns to trust Bella's judgment, and you see his love for her mature, deepen.
Exactly. He grows with the relationship. He becomes a partner. Edgar, on the other hand, well, he seems sincere enough in his affection, but his emotional range feels pretty limited.
Yeah, very much so.
He just struggles to understand or connect with Catherine's deeper passions, and he ends up resenting what he can't grasp about her bond with Heathcliff. He kind of becomes more of a background figure in her actual emotional story.
So Edward, the initially tormented immortal protector, he works through his stuff, becomes more supportive, gets the girl, the family, the whole package.
Finds a version of happiness, yeah.
Whereas Edgar, the socially acceptable, stable guy, he just stays emotionally static. He was chosen for status, not passion, and ultimately he kind of just fades out of Catherine's intense narrative. Dies quietly.
Overshadowed. Now, let's circle back briefly to the lasting impact of our more intensely passionate guys, Jacob and Heathcliff, particularly on the generations that come after them.
Right, this is where things get kind of dark again, isn't it?
It can be, yeah.
Heathcliff's obsession with Catherine, it doesn't die with her. Not at all. It fuels this whole destructive cycle of revenge and manipulation that directly messes up the lives of their kids.
Absolutely. He's basically trying to force them to replay his own tragic love story, making them suffer in similar ways. It's chilling.
It really is. It shows how unresolved pain can just poison everything that follows. And in a different way, you see a similar kind of generational connection with Jacob imprinting on 𝔚𝔢𝔦𝔫𝔤.
Right. While it's presented very differently as this sort of faded protective bond.
Yeah, not malicious like Heathcliff's scheming.
It still undeniably creates this permanent, incredibly strong link to Bella's daughter. It ensures Jacob remains a central, powerful figure in her life forever. It's a continuation of his story, his influence into the next generation.
It definitely keeps him tethered to that family line. Okay, so finally, let's just quickly touch on how Edward and Edgar really diverge when it comes to evolving in how they understand passion and love.
Yeah, this feels like a pretty clear difference between them.
Totally. Edward goes on this whole journey, learning to genuinely understand and respect what Bella wants, even embracing their shared supernatural life in the end. His love grows, it adapts, he's willing to change for the relationship.
Exactly. He learns to love with both intensity and understanding. He moves past those initial fears and that need for absolute control. Now, contrast that with Edgar.
Yeah.
He stays completely rooted in his societal norms, his kind of limited emotional world. He never ever truly gets Catherine's passionate nature or that almost elemental connection she has with Heathcliff.
No clue.
No. And he shows zero evolution in how he understands or expresses love. He just remains static in that respect.
So, okay, wrapping this all up, we've definitely uncovered some really compelling parallels today, haven't we?
I think so, yeah. It's pretty striking when you lay it out.
That often toxic possessive love dynamic shared by Jacob and Heathcliff. The similar archetype of Edward and Edgar as the safer, but maybe less emotionally connected choices. We've also looked at how both Jacob and Heathcliff leave this lasting mark on the next generation. And that crucial split in how Edward's understanding of love matures, while Edgar's doesn't.
Right, and this all kind of leads to a really interesting final thought for you watching on BookTube to maybe mull over.
Okay.
Think about how things like societal expectations or personal trauma, how they shape the way love is understood and shown in these stories we love and in loads of others too. What does our fascination, because we're fascinated, right? What does our fascination with both the really passionate, sometimes destructive kinds of love and the seemingly stable, safe kinds? What does that tell us about our own hopes and fears when it comes to relationships?
Wow, yeah. Definitely something to chew on there. So if you found these literary connections as fascinating as we did, and I hope you did, please give us a thumbs up.
Yeah, let us know.
And definitely subscribe to Cracking Chronicles channel for more deep dives into the stories you love.